a little bit more on this in your own introduction. But Firas works for several years at Philips as a project manager, at the moment as a senior project manager, and has experience in various basically communities in which the latest, if I may say it correctly, the Company Delegate Young Professionals Program of the UN. We're very curious to hear actually how you merge both worlds and how you bring in your experience of these communities into developing actually strategies for ecosystems and how you develop ecosystems. So I would just give the floor to you and very much look forward to hear your story.
Thank you, Natalia. So brief introduction. Thank you to add to the introduction, I would say. Indeed, working for Philips, living in Amsterdam, and very passionate about ecosystems. And not per se ecosystems, but more the fundamental of ecosystem, which is connection, which I just am fascinated about, human connection, but also how does it scale into groups of people, and then how do organizations connect with each other. Of course, this is a perfect age to be interested in connection, because there are a lot of connections now, a lot more even digital, which impact the human connections in some cases. So that's just fascinating that there are a lot of developments. And when we bring that back to how do organizations succeed in this age, there's a realization that, you cannot do this alone. So there's even more interest in further developing the frameworks and real life cases of what this means in reality. So that got me interested. Was also part of my master's in technology, policy, and management related to socio-technical systems, which is how do you bring society and people together with, well, technical organizational systems, and how does that go together hand in hand. Part of my job is to make that work internally within the organization, let different groups of people across disciplines work together. And more recently, I'm exploring how different organizations can work together, publicly and privately, as part of indeed a young professionals program of the UN Global Compact. So today's topic will be around the journey to successful ecosystem play, which I'll highlight a few lessons on how to approach certain things, and give a voiceover from my experience. And then we'll go into a co-creation session afterwards to discuss this very topic, and hopefully to bring along certain lessons learned that we've taken from this session. Very, very soon after kind of this whole setting came about, something came to my mind. It's the journey, not the destination, that matters. A quote by Thomas Stearns Eliot, and that's definitely the journey that relates to ecosystems, because you'll never be there. There's no end state. As we will also see, there's continuous work, continuous effort, and it needs to come from all sides, I would say. That's really something to keep in mind on anything you do related to ecosystems. So today's outline is I'll briefly talk about what is an ecosystem, just to have a common definitions. Why bother? Why is this important? And then go into the soft as well as success factors of ecosystems and how to make that work. Before we start the journey of seeking objective, doing mapping analysis, the positioning and role related to the ecosystem play, and then going to kind of the details of, okay, how do you make this concrete? With who do you partner? In what way? And how do you bring that all together? Which comes together nicely in the co-creation. But first, let's talk about ecosystems. When I think of the term ecosystems, I think of nature. And there's a lot of inspiration that's drawn from nature. We talk about ecosystems and business as usual, or in general nowadays. Specifically, when we talk about design, A lot of things in design are borrowed from nature more and more. And ecosystems is not any different, I would say. In nature, different elements work together. The official ecological definition is a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. And this is always very complex and interconnected. And we'll see that we have these different levels of organization in nature that we're replicating in business, in this case, or in organizations publicly and privately, to simulate what's happening in nature. So what happens if we do that? Well, we have different flavors of collaboration and connection. We have the very famous strategic partnership relationship, which can be more linear, or either kind of a joint collaboration or something in the line of business, or more vertically a relationship, but it's always linear, or kind of. Then in 1997 there was a definition around a competition, defined by James Moore, Brandenburger, and Neil Buff, as saying, okay, this might be not zero sum. There might be competition as well as collaboration that's possible between two parties, and it's not always a customer-supplier relationship that can occur. You're also visualized as kind of the key difference on how this works conceptually, or looks like conceptually. Now, the essence of business ecosystems is to create value that nobody can create on their own. And when we take the formal definition of business ecosystems as defined by the same James Moore in 1993, see that it's a network of organizations and individuals that co-evolve their capabilities and roles and align their investments to create additional value and or improve efficiency. This can be in many different ways, different forms, but it's always together with a few key principles that always come back. When we look into the more recent developments on understanding what's happening here, it's also called more of a designed ecosystem, because people are kind of orchestrating this network of players, seeing how value can be created and which person can add which role and which added value and component to it in a more modular way. As we can see in nature, that different things have a different role. We're replicating this as well, while still keeping that connectivity of the different elements, but always in a shared and complementary way. That is the key differentiator compared to all the other forms of collaborations and partnerships. But why is this important? So, especially in these days where everything is getting more complex, one of the things that is also becoming more complex is competition. So in order to ensure your business continuity for businesses, but also for the private sector, also to make sure that collaborations can occur across industries, but also what the public sector, it's very important to see, okay, what do I need to do? And in most cases, this doesn't lie within the borders of their own organization. So I need to look into, okay, how do I change things? Among things is the digital nature of recent developments. Everything is interconnected through the internet. We have Internet of Things, we have data exchange. So more and more is needed as well when we look into collaboration. But how do we shape this? Eventually to create value that we couldn't create our own. And this might also bring about a shift from normal competition to competing ecosystems, because then see different groups that team up together, that have complementary assets and capabilities, which then together are not not competitors of each other anymore, but of others that also most probably have shaped ecosystems themselves to be able to cater for this. And in this, you see it more and more happening as the service economy is evolving into a X as a service. So anything that can be, from mobility to energy to data, that requires a lot of different competencies and assets that then come together in these ecosystems. So there's a real urgency to go into ecosystems in order to go forward with your organization. Now, there are a lot of benefits to taking this approach. Resilience is the main one, making sure that you survive over time, and that's more crucial in these times of rapid innovation and acceleration of developments in mostly technology. But things move fast, so how do you keep up with the pace? Probably that's not running alone, but running together and making sure that people can pass the baton at the right moment in time to win the marathon instead of making it a sprint run. It's always to cater for the needs of customers, but in this case, it's also to make sure that you're on pace with the acceleration and, well, so-called disruption. If things are taken in a completely different way nowadays compared to the past, and being more flexible, more agile to see, okay, where do I spot opportunities and how can I react to these to create more value and eventually drive growth. Research by Accenture has shown that most executives interviewed see that driving value as well based on ecosystems solely, specifically focused on creating a competitive advantage, making better use of data and serve customers better, and with that create also better new customer experiences. Most probably fueled by new innovations and disruptive approaches to things. However, there are struggles because there is a lack of experience, lack of capabilities in most cases in organizations to actually take this approach. So you can have it in mind, but how do you get there? Even here, research shows that most targets of ecosystem collaborations are not met or are relatively low, measured in growth. It's 1 to 2% revenue growth. That's hit in almost half of the collaborations, and yeah, there's a lot of struggles. When we look into the reasoning of these struggles, it really relates to the fundamentals of what is the effective strategy. What do you want to achieve? How do you make sure that your organization is ready to change in the right way to cater for that direction, and to actually successfully collaborate with others? So perhaps setting aside your own interests at first, and your own image and perhaps ego, for that matter. And this is very relevant because when executives have been asked around the challenges in creating ecosystems, it's being very concerned about sharing their company information with others. You don't know who you can trust and to what extent. If you're successful yourself and you have a certain legacy to lose. Of course, startups have it very easy because there's no legacy, so there's nothing or less to lose compared to the established parties. And then it's also very practical in developing things together and setting up something that can be leveraged by several parties, while keeping your current business in pace. So a lot of complexities on working together with others that form the actual struggles when it comes to ecosystems. Now, there are successes and specific success factors, and there might be more of a soft to it than a hard one, although it's a combination of both. When we want to make an ecosystem approach successful, it's all about culture, and with that, the mindset of the organization and the individuals. It needs to be set by example. So from top to bottom, there needs to be a willingness to actually act upon this collaboration in an ecosystem, which means letting go potentially of certain mindsets that the owner organization needs to be dominant or is a key player or is essential in whatever way.
May I ask something in between?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I'm trying to still figure out what type of ecosystem we are talking about. Is then, for instance, Philips and Douwe Egberts, would you say that was also an ecosystem, or is that then something else than an ecosystem in your view?
That was more of a strategic partnership because that was on more or less equal grounds. Two complementary organizations that work together, and there were no more partners involved. Perhaps a better example of an ecosystem when we talk about coffee is Nespresso, which manages a whole chain of different things, elements that come together in a well-designed experience of drinking coffee in the flavor that you like best and that they cater for in apparently a very sustainable way, if I can believe their marketing communications, while not producing the machines themselves, not managing the whole chain, but really finding building blocks of, okay, we need the farmers, we need the coffee, we need the machines, and bring that all together as more of an orchestrator to ensure that everything works together. That has different components to it than a coffee machine and the coffee pads, I would say.
No, thanks. Now I can place this better. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. So this is also very important because it requires leadership to make this possible. This mindset to collaborate and say, okay, maybe I cannot deliver everything myself, or shouldn't deliver everything myself. And depending on which industry, of course, and which setting, it can be different elements that you bring in as a asset or as a competency. And where possible, it requires training and the right incentives and even recruitment to ensure that you have the right people involved. Because with the right people and the right mindset, you can then explore and start the journey to create an ecosystem play, and then define in that play what role you'll have and how you want to achieve your objectives. So there's a more softer side to things before we actually kick off to the more tangible things on okay, how do we build these different building blocks together to create something that works together, in which different people, different parties bring complementary elements to the table that then fit well in this big puzzle. Now, if we go more into the shift between the soft and the harder factors, there have been 4 ingredients defined for success. It's the human-centric approach, also known as design thinking, to really understand, okay, who is the end beneficiary of the thing that we're doing here. and who do we need to collaborate with in order to achieve this without excluding anybody in this, and who's there in general to collaborate with. This can be small organizations, individuals, large organizations. So we need to keep an open mindset on who we can connect with, as well as being very concrete when it comes to the more harder factors of success, which is actually knowing what we're capable of in our internal ways of working, processes, and as well as everything that transcends our own organizational borders with others, and making sure that all the agreements are well defined and written down in a clear way, that there's no way to misinterpret the arrangements made, especially when you start with an ecosystem that grows over time. Can be very challenging to make sure that everybody's on the same page, everybody has the same understanding of what the objective is, and how to move forward. Now, this requires a lot of flexibility, and with that also a specific focus on having a lot of diversity in the number of ecosystem partners, to see that, okay, the more diverse the set of partners is, the less overlap there is, and the more you can focus on the interdependencies, on how you can build upon each other, instead of having discussions of, are we competing or not? And one of the ways is to look into complementary niches and seeing, okay, how do you then cater for something that none of us can cater for on our own, but together we can create this unique offering. It can be in products or services in whatever way that we can focus on together. And then together we can define our responsibilities as a joint ecosystem, as well as a individual participant in this ecosystem. And we can define the governance structures and how we can compensate ourselves for the thing we bring in. And specifically focused on compensation, it might be that the elements that you bring in are not equally divided among all partners. So then, of course, it's also very logical to make sure that the rewards are equal to the input into the ecosystem. Briefly summarized in a few equations that I found in a very nice article is focus on value, make sure that 1 + 1 equals more than 2. When you focus on management, make sure that everybody's on the same page. So 1 + 1 should equal 1. And when we talk about fair value sharing, whatever it is that you bring in, make sure that the output is also eventually fairly split when you create more value as the ecosystem grows and different people of different parties bring different elements in. Key differentiator here is that every party brings in something else and takes out something else. So it's really key to focus on these elements when we focus on defining the ways of working. Then we need to look over time. So we have the initial growth phase, then it scales, and then it's a continuous improvement efforts.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
I will be very curious to hear more about your experience, so more than the theory, also your experience at Philips, among others, because what does success really mean, right? And when does it, like, is it scrutinized? When does it get into play? When maybe success for you means not success for another company? And how do you define something called collective success or collective goal. And I would be curious to hear more about that. So maybe you have some more than the theory, you have more empirical examples. That would be very nice to hear, because that I think shows also the difficulties of doing this, right?
Definitely, yeah. So when and you're asking this question directly, exactly at the right time, because it's especially the thing that is shown here. So managing something over time, which adds to the complexity of this, is where things become more difficult, to put it lightly, and make it more difficult to reach success jointly. Speaking from example, there was a initiative a few years ago that was involved in actively around creating an ecosystem for care in Netherlands, and there perhaps it was also, when we talk about timing, perhaps it was too early to initiate something like that. Compared to something that you would initiate in a similar way today. It proved that there was a lot of difficulty in bringing the right people together to have complementary assets and competencies. When we look into care, we have nowadays always a piece of technology that's there. Well, you can imagine that a health technology company can cater for that. And then we need a data system where everything comes together of hospitals and patients and care networks. And how do you bring that together? And there already the complexity starts, because these competencies and assets of a health technology company might be stronger on paper or in the past in different ways than in an ecosystem in which you need to interact with others, and everybody brings something in, but the puzzle might not fit based on what you have or think you have when you kind of look in your own house, see how you can rearrange your furniture to invite the guests over. So there it proved to be a challenge in getting the right people involved, because what's the incentive if a large dominant player in healthcare reaches out to very small organizations that deliver care, I would say, in a more tangible way, the real care networks, or provide very specific solutions for communication and care delivery that are perhaps on paper complementary, but when you have a large organization joining the table or reaching out to you, there's always a kind of a feeling of a threat that comes up in reality that is very hard to cater for. And referring back to the soft success factors of ecosystems and the mindset, in hindsight, I believe that was more because of a let's say almost an egocentric approach to ecosystems, that the own organization or the large organization should lead whatever will happen together. So then you can also question the earlier defined definition of ecosystems, because it's not one organization that rules, it's different elements coming together, and that is both in a soft factor of kind of how do people click together, which doesn't always go well because different personalities might or might not click. And then you go into more organizational factors. If you scale it that way, then how do different organizations relate to each other? If you have a more of a corporate, large scale organization compared to very small practical organizations that actually work on a very practical manner and deliver local care, how do you fit that together? Because there might be even a bridge to build in professionalization between the two organizations, or the different types of organizations. And then we go into more of the hard factors, or as also here on screen on planning, what do you want to do, and communication and rewards. Then that's very practical, I would say, and very tangible to write that down, but it doesn't cater for the gaps that you have on, do different organizations that you approach fit together? Actually, do the people that are invited to the table actually are they open to the conversation or not? And that's the main struggle in the examples that I've been in, that there's always kind of a rush to the paperwork and to designing and defining things, mostly from your own perspective and your own strength, but perhaps with a lower level of realism in what you need from others to actually succeed, which was probably also the reason why you didn't do it yourself as an organization. So that's kind of the gray area in which it's very hard to succeed first time, I would say, because it requires a lot of preparation in selecting right partners and being very honest on what do you actually bring to the table, and what do you not bring to the table, or which elements do you actually need from somebody else. And this actually comes back to, okay, what do you want to achieve in general? Why start an ecosystem play? And one of the key questions to ask here is why bother in that way to actually approach other parties if you cannot create value for them, and gear your own organization towards the value creation for others. So you have different gears that fall into place together that create more value, as the definition of ecosystems has been, but that's in reality not always the case, because of perhaps more the soft factors and a perception of dominance of one or even more players that want to control things. And I think the key takeaway here is that the more you want to control things, the less likely you will be in succeeding, because then it's also less likely that you're actually questioning which role you'll play and what the conditions would be for the collaboration for everybody involved, and how you would change your own mindset and behavior and organization towards the ecosystem play that you're going into.
I can imagine that you have a different starting point of that you have a vision and you don't know how to act on it, or start it yourself. So you get other parties to join your vision, but then that would be something completely else. Or do you think that won't help because you have such a different starting point?
That really depends. It's a very good point you're mentioning there, because it might be that the vision is too far-fetched, and you need a lot of convincing of others to actually make it work, to bring people, at least the right people, to the table, not even to take it forward from there. And also might be that, your vision is very self-centered and not around the needs of your customer, or perhaps a group that you're not catering for today, but more of your existing customers, for example, in which you just need a complementary asset or a capability that you do not have, or that's perhaps something you don't want to acquire. You don't want to buy another company that provides this. So then it will be kind of an easy way of saying, let's partner up. And then because this ecosystem word is so hip and happening, let's call it ecosystems. While perhaps the objective is not really related to it, because how many different elements do you actually need to make it work?
And Firas, sorry to interrupt, but I'm very curious if you could explain certain key elements of this process, like the real journey in your experience of Philips, because I think then it comes to life, because that helps us really understand, for example, what role do you play, right? If you can enlighten for us a real life example, so maybe you can go to the journey in which you explain, for example, what sort of conditions are at play whenever you pick the role that you should play. You know, do you have your own say over that, or do you need to negotiate it with others, and how does that take place? And I think when we move to this super level of concrete detail, because it's such a difficult topic, right? Ecosystems, for me at least, it will be more understandable. So how do we actually decide what role to play? And do you have a concrete example? And I just wanted to propose something in case it's more sensitive information, which I know you're concerned of. We could also turn it off, the recording, and we could speak more like in depth if you're more comfortable. But I think that will be very valuable to really get into the details of how, in your experience, it has been difficult, or what did you learn, you know, like, yeah.
No, definitely, I can give more body to it. The approach I took so far was also to build some structure to the conversation, also based on some theory that's out there and research that has been done to kind of give it a little bit more grip, and then to add to that, the main objective of the initiatives I've been involved in was also always larger than the organization itself. So from a Philips perspective, being originally just a provider of medical equipment, among other things, if you really want to make a difference in a healthcare system, it also requires a healthcare system approach. And that goes both ways. You can see which companies you can partner up with, or you can define and which also was mentioned just now, a great vision of saying, okay, how can we do things completely different? How can we really bring everybody together that's currently doing something with care, and organize ourselves for that? Now, the key pitfall from a large organization is that there's always a tendency that most capabilities are already in-house. You just need to kind of add the complementary elements to the puzzle to make it all work. Reality is different.
Can you describe a situation like that? So
yeah, so if you have a piece of technology like scanners and medical devices that can be applied in clinics, that's just one part of delivering care, because imagine you're a patient, you go to probably a general practitioner, or have interaction with a nurse in a care network, or with doctors in hospital. There's only one element that touches that device potentially in your journey as a patient. So from that perspective, if you want to improve care, you go more into a kind of a patient journey and see all the touch points there. And if you take that approach as from a patient journey, then the elements that you bring in as a health technology company, for example, are minimum, because I would say, as a patient, I would rather more have a lot of interaction in talking with different people than with a piece of technology, which is kind of a scanner or a data system, because I don't relate to that directly. and depending on how serious the condition is, it might go through different layers of organizations, from your general practitioner to a care network to a hospital, and all these different organizations might need to collaborate with each other. And then the element of technology is marginalized, and to present yourself in a certain way that you're almost humble enough to say, we really need you, and you can be a care network that does has a call center for everybody that calls, and has actual caretakers that work for them, that visit people, or has a network of general practitioners, or does remote care through different ways, through sending pictures from one place to another, so that a clinician can view them and send them back outside of the network, almost kind of a second opinion like approach. Or it can be an exchange of information through different levels of care between your general practitioner and your doctor or specialist in the hospital. So if you take that approach, and the vision is to improve care for the patient in general, by kind of integrating all the different elements, then it takes a very humble approach to say, okay, let's come together and let's talk about the vision, instead of, hey, let's come together and let's focus on what role my technology will play. And that's in at least the care network ecosystem setup. That was always a key element. That there was always some, I would say, not enough humbleness to start off with to make it work. If we go to more recent examples, one which is now public, or two actually. One is around circular economy, called the Platform for Accelerating Circular Economy, PACE, and the second one being the Digital Connected Care Coalition. These are really examples of more of that humble approach, and saying, okay, we have a vision to a fully circular business, or a vision to providing care wherever it's needed, especially focused on the low and middle income communities in the world, which might be in Southeast Asia, Africa, India, and South America, among others. So how do we cater for that? And then it's just of almost a problem statement you put out to a different community of organizations, which might be public, which can be private, and say, okay, how do we solve this then? This is our challenge that we put to the table. And that's a completely different approach than saying, let's improve care in a specific way, and let's bring in our piece to the puzzle, being technology in most cases, and let's work from that starting point.
How do you tackle
a question on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because is that because you mentioned before that what might happen is that people call it a buzzword, that it's, let's call it an ecosystem when it's rather a partnership. Would the definition for you for an ecosystem then be that you have a shared goal on vision, or a shared vision, rather than you have a shared goal in the Senseo example of achieving the next coffee machine?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but starting point can be that only one party has this vision. This is probably in most cases, because there needs to be, it needs to start somewhere, and some dream bigger than others, I would say.
Yeah.
So that's perfectly fine. And perhaps it's the more interesting examples, I would say, but that's, I don't know enough about it, is that I would say it's a startup or individual reaches out to a larger organization, say, hey, I have this big vision, and you're just one of the players that can contribute to it. Shall we create an ecosystem approach to it, to bring all the pieces and puzzles of the puzzle together to change things.
And even though there are just two parties involved, then you would already call it an ecosystem collaboration.
It's very hard if it's two. I would not call it an ecosystem if it's two, because it's the level of commitment and involvement might be equal, which might not need be in an ecosystem. And there might be some of a power position, one being larger than the other, or some kind of dominance that can be played out if there are two parties compared to more. Yeah. But that's an interesting question, and I'll definitely explore that further to see which examples there are around two or more organizations teaming up and really being an ecosystem.
Thank you.
So, concerning time, maybe it's good now to move towards the conclusion and then to leave some space for questions.
Yeah. So after the start of the objective and approach to things, you would map the landscape out there just to understand whether you can join the existing ecosystem or you need to create your own, and that's also one of the key questions. After being more sure about whether your vision is already being realized by somebody else and you can just join, or the needs of your customers is already being catered for only without you, then you could say you can join, and otherwise it would be more of a decision to create your own ecosystem. And that comes also well together in the positioning and role, because at the end of the day, you need a lot of different elements coming together if you create your own, which relates to the strategy, and you really need to define that, the business model, operating model, all around IP and ways of working together, arranging the right cultural fit. And so that's a lot of complexity, I would say, for being an orchestrator of an ecosystem, that you then start your own ecosystem, which is the main pitfall in almost all cases, that organizations want to start their own. So what would be a better way what would be a better way to approach this is to first join another ecosystem collaboration and learn from that and see whether that's good enough, or you need to really put all the effort in, which is a lot, to create a new ecosystem that you'll be driving as an organization. And then it also comes to, these are the questions that then become relevant in what do others bring in, and how do you select the right partners. And these are all things that are less relevant if you're just joining another ecosystem and having a more of a complementary role compared to driving the whole effort. And this is a good bridge to actually kind of keeping in check of, what's the objective? What do you want to do? Is it expansion? Is it something you absolutely cannot do on your own as kind of an offering, whether it's a service or a product? Or is it something that kind of already exists and you want to do it in a slightly different way? And these questions continuously come back into the moment that you start the co-creation, and what do you want to then achieve together? And as soon as you're with two or more parties at the same table, how do the questions change and the answers to the questions change compared to the initial answers that you gave to the questions when you didn't reach out to any other organization? That on one side, and the other side is, how do you create the blueprint of such a ecosystem? So which roles and competencies, capabilities come where? Because most probably it's going to be a kind of a separated organization, not part of your own organization. And then you have different elements coming together, and who will manage this. So there's an ecosystem partnership manager, which can be one role or one organization that takes it up, probably more one person or team that brings together all the different elements of the collaboration, dealing with tensions, making sure that communication is straight, that everybody is still following that same vision and strategy, and that all the struggles that are faced in reality are taken care of. And this was also, in my example, there was no partnership manager, because if you are the orchestrator of an ecosystem, if you initiate it and you're also the partnership manager, then you have a lot of conflict of interest, I would almost say. There's a very thin line between managing everything and inviting others to the table, compared to making the table available and inviting others to the conversation based on a certain vision that you might have. And then these roles are very crucial to take into account, and making sure that you're not the only one, the only player in the ecosystem play that takes up all these roles. And then it's asking a lot of questions to come to concrete examples initially, and then refine it over time. And okay, what are we going to do together? How does it work together? If it's technology related, how do our data systems work together? How are we going to deliver things to eventually a customer and beneficiary? And how are we going to manage this whole organization? And that also ties back into which party will play which role. If you're only with two people or two organizations, then it's more blurry in whether you can actually create an ecosystem out of it, because you'll be just splitting tasks. And if a third organization comes in, then it might be very hard to give things out. And this is also the question that will be key in this co-creation session today, is how do you approach it internally, an ecosystem play? How do you start that? Which department? How do you organize yourself for success? And with that, I want to open the floor for any questions.
I have a question.
Beert is putting her hand up. Maybe we can stop the recording and we can go to the